I firmly believe that if this social distancing, virtual learning has taught us anything, it is the importance of having a means of teaching students and helping them build musicianship that goes beyond just the typical rehearsal time that we so often do within our school systems.
I just think there's so many real-world applications to this. And when I think of a portfolio in those contexts, it's a lot less daunting for me.
Welcome to the Choir Baton, a podcast designed to engage with people and stories, ideas, and inspirations stemming from choir. No other art form, no sport, no hobby, no business requires a group of people to execute a communal goal with just their voices. Join me, your host, Beth Philemon, as I interview guests who are singers, teacher conductors, instrumentalists, and community members. Together, we'll ask questions, seek understanding, and share insight from our experiences in life and in choir. Hi, Choir Baton listeners. Before we begin the audio for this next podcast episode, I wanted to give a bit of an introduction about why and what you are about to hear. Currently, we are not having rehearsals and performances like we normally would, and that has really turned a lot of how and why we do what we do up on its head. And some of us are embracing it more than others. I'm not here to tell you how you should embrace it or not, but I do want to talk with you about something that has been on my heart as a choir conductor for many, many years. When I first started teaching choir in 2009, I was so fortunate to be at one of the top 5 high schools in the state of Tennessee. We also were a K-12 school, so I taught the middle school choir there, and all of my students had come from an elementary music program as well. Here I was thinking that I was teaching these students to read music, but ultimately I was more or less just guiding them because they had amazing fundamentals from my elementary counterpart. It wasn't until I left that school, went to grad school, came back to North Carolina and began teaching at a middle school that I realized I ultimately had no idea what I was doing. You see, at this middle school, the students had not had a music program in many years. And it's like a lot of the programs that are out there in the world that have not had a consistent music program or a music program at all, or maybe there's been one, but it is not your dream situation in that every student walks in the door and does what's expected of them. And for me, it was basically unlike any music experience I had ever encountered, whether it was me as a student in a music learning environment or it was a student teaching or observation environment that I'd ever seen. And through that, I realized a lot of what I didn't know and needed to know in order to be successful. And quite honestly, I talk about it a lot, but that was one of the hardest years of my life. But it also began to lay this foundation for what Choir Baton is all about, and that is more people singing. And we are serving that in one way right now, and that is through helping teachers have the resources and the guidance in how to teach musical skills for students, and especially music literacy when you are at a school that is kind of mixed, where you have advanced students and non-advanced students, and quite honestly, students that want to be there and students that don't want to be there. You know, I had all of these preconceived notions that when you enter a school that first year, you might have students in your program that don't want to be there, but eventually, by my amazing teaching, and not even that, but my amazing passion for choral music, I would convince them and bring them over to my side, or they would just leave the program and realize that my high standards were not for them. And I laugh because you just learn that that's like not necessarily the case. And I think more than ever, while teaching does have a lot to do with who you are as a person and the expectations that you set for yourself and your students, there is a lot more that you can't control than you either previously could in years teaching, or that you thought you could control from the very beginning. Now, from that school, I moved to a high school position in where we were beginning to talk about how we were assessing across the entire school. And I knew, based on my experience at that middle school, that I needed to be able to show students, show guardians and parents, and show administration what students could do and what they could not do, how they were meeting standards and how they were not meeting standards. Because my previous teaching experience, every student was always inching forward and always moving towards meeting the goals that we were doing. But when I began teaching at other schools, I realized that not only do students in every school not always act like that, or act is probably the wrong word, and there's a better pedagogical word to assessment instead of acting, but I'll use the word acting there. But not every student always responds in that way. And my previous means of assessing students, basically just through their rehearsal technique, was no longer effective. And I needed to showcase that better. I needed to indicate to guardians, to admin, to students what they were doing and what was expected, and quite honestly comparing it to other students in regards to, this is an example of something that is meeting expectations, and this is an example of something that is not meeting expectations. And at that school, I began to really look at the standards. And I laugh because when I first started teaching and kind of looking at standards, I just thought they were a load of, I'll be honest, like crap that, governing bodies put into place, that I believed every single aspect of the rehearsal process could meet a standard, and that me in an educational setting, that I could check off all of those standards just through having students come in, warm up, work on maybe some literacy, and rehearse the material, give a concert, and check. I could find a creative way to link all of my standards to that. And the more I began studying the standards, particularly in the state of North Carolina, I realized that I was not meeting all of those standards like I could, and through the rehearsal process, and that I needed to find a better way to not only meet all of those standards, but also show to administration, show to parents, show to students, this is where your student is, and this is where you are at, and this is what is expected within this ensemble, and you either are meeting this, you're exceeding this, or you're not meeting this. And from that birthed this realization that we could use a digital portfolio, in a sense, to show students growth. And so from there, I began to think about what that would look like, what that would contain, why we needed to do it, and begin to build out this process. And that was in 2015. And 5 years later, here I am still talking about digital portfolios. So what you're about to listen to is a conference presentation I gave at the 2017 North Carolina Music Educators Conference. And the title of it was the Portfolio Proposal. And in it, I outline what I mean by a portfolio. And I also talk about a portfolio doesn't have to strictly exist online. It can exist in a paper format as well. But the goal behind this portfolio proposal mindset is, how can we show what students are doing in our rehearsals? And quite honestly, how can we show that individually for each student? Because that is more important now than ever, to be able to track where students are and where they are growing for so many different reasons. And I could do a whole other podcast episode on that. But before you listen to this presentation, I just wanted to leave you with four, although the fourth one is big enough that I do think it could probably be five. 4 reasons why I believe that you should even begin to entertain the idea of tracking students' progress through a portfolio. And it's funny, you'll see I now have a producer of the podcast, and that producer is a former student of mine and a current music education student. And as we were talking about this episode, I said, okay, Maggie, I said, be real with me. You've done portfolios for me. And in fact, if you are watching this on YouTube, there will be some links to the actual presentation slide deck that I did, and you'll see some examples of things that I'm going to talk about that you could use as components of your portfolio. But, and a lot of those examples are Maggie's. And I said, what are your thoughts on this? Like, am I just barking up this like crazy tree? Is this too idealistic, right? And we had a whole conversation about it. And Maggie said, she is, I think the importance with portfolios is students need to be able to see why they're doing them, and they're not just doing them to check off the box. They are something that they can use beyond the class. They are something that they can use to showcase the work that they're doing, instead of just necessarily how they are meeting an objective or a standard, and that they're an actual resource. And I love that she shared that, because I think that is so true, and something that I can continue to get better at in sharing about portfolios to students and to y'all as well, is that the work that we do is all connected, and it should all be really focused on documenting the process that we are living and not necessarily the product. And I think the most relevant example for us with that is that of social media. Instagram, because it's my jam. Instagram is, in a sense, for me, a portfolio. It is showcasing different ideas and videos and pictures of essentially kind of like my life journey as to what I'm learning and what I'm doing. And I generally always post on my personal Instagram, just because it's something I want to remember and document. Occasionally it'll be like, oh, I think this could really potentially help someone. Or sometimes it's like, I'm just a dork, I'm going to post this because I think it's funny, or this is really inspirational. But, it really is a source for me to go back and reference the growth that I have made as a person through my life. And that is essentially what you want to replicate with a digital portfolio for your students in a choral classroom. It is a cool, real, relevant way for you to have students showcase the growth that they have made in your choral experience, whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, or more. So the 4 top reasons that I really urge you to consider and even entertaining the idea of a virtual portfolio is this. First and foremost, it builds internet literacy. The internet is not going anywhere, and as well as I do, that people not involved in education don't understand the digital gaps within our students. So often they think because they grew up with cell phones and iPads and the internet, they know how it all works, when in reality, they don't. And by you beginning to put a digital portfolio into practice, you are giving them skills that will establish them in whatever career they go into, whether it is in a service industry and they have to build a website or even know what to put up on a website for to advertise their business. Maybe they do become a professional performer or conductor, and they need to have a website that showcases the work that they do and who they are. Maybe they go into academia and research. I'm a graduate student at NC State, and I'm work in the marketing and communications department for the graduate school. And I have conversations with students and faculty every week about the importance of building a digital presence as an engineer, as a chemist, so on and so forth. This concept of existing in a professional way on the internet is not going anywhere. And you have the opportunity to show students how to do that through building a digital portfolio. That's reason number one. Reason number two is it gives you a chance to have students shine individually and learn from them individually as well. One of my favorite parts of implementing digital portfolios with students was that point when we would just set up a Google site through the county's parameters that was how they asked us to do it, was through Google Sites. And we would just set up the main pages, a main page, an about me page, and then standards pages. And that first time in the computer lab was just building the actual setup of the site. And then it was also adding an about me page. And it was fascinating to see what students would pick as their picture, to see what they would write as about me. I learned so much about my students by being able to just read that simple page. Moving forward, when they began adding artifacts of how they were meeting those standards based on assignments that I had given, it was fascinating to see what they would choose and how well they would really take the time to showcase the individual work they were doing. And it wasn't even that all of the artifacts that they were presenting were individual artifacts. Sometimes an artifact was a recording of a choir concert and them writing a reflection on it. They took the time to format things differently or to write unique things that felt a little bit more real because it was existing on a website than just on a piece of paper than what I had years and years ago asked them to do. So it gives you an amazing opportunity to really see the individual work that a student is doing, especially if they're not your most talented vocalist or sight reader or anything like that. You don't have to be the best sight reader to showcase a really great website of something that you are sight reading of. And that is really important, I think, for all students to get an opportunity to shine. Similarly, if you are a great sight reader and don't do well with this sort of website or organizational thing, well, you can still be simple with it and still make that look good as well. The third thing, and this again is something I said could easily be like reasons 3 and 4 because it's so big, is just the way for you to be able to track students' growth within it. And I think this is so important for students to be able to see and showcase how they have grown from point A in the year to point B in the year. And then it's also something that, parents and guardians and parents and guardians, they understand websites and they understand that this started at the beginning and this started at the end, and whether you can see growth or whether you cannot see growth. And I meant to add this earlier too. For students that don't turn in work, well, that is a very evident thing for a parent to see, is when they go to a student's website and the work is either there or it isn't there. And that is very powerful for parents to see the physicality of a student's work existing or not existing. And finally, it's great for administrators and other teachers to see, no, you are meeting these standards, and here is how you are meeting these standards with actual artifacts that coexist beyond just the typical rehearsal experience that administrators see when they evaluate you, or maybe if they come to your concerts at all. And I know I mentioned that this process gave me ideas and inspiration for ways to teach students beyond just the rehearsal. And that in and of itself is a whole other thing, and something I talk about some in the teaching membership, and will only begin to continue talking about as well. If you are interested and you're stuck and you're like, okay, I'm on board, but how do I find some of those other ways to make sure that the students are learning what's happening and checking that individually beyond just the typical rehearsal setting? And then, so the tracking growth and showing the evidence of the growth, and again, progress, not perfection, progress, not product, is integral in implementing this portfolio style assessment and into your choir experience. But the fourth and final one here that is ultimately why I'm sharing this with you right now is because for all of you, not so many of you, for all of you, end of the year concerts are done. They are not going to happen. And students are longing for a culminating experience. And quite frankly, you are longing for a culminating experience. There's something about that final choir performance that kind of puts the cherry on top for the year. And a digital portfolio, me preaching about this, is not designed to take that place whatsoever. But I do think it is an opportunity for students to kind of see and really think and reflect upon how they have grown this school year, and then have a tangible product that they can either take with them into college, or they can take with them into the following school year, and be able to showcase, well, this is what we have done. This is an example of why choir is valuable to me and what I've missed most from the time here. And it links this experience to past and future experiences that they will have as well. So you're about to hear this presentation that I gave at the North Carolina Music Educators Conference. And in this presentation, I outlined some similar reasons why I believe that portfolios are so important to assess how students are learning and growing in a choir experience beyond just checking off on rehearsal skills. I share why I firmly believe in this because of how poorly I assessed at the beginning of my teaching career, when I had students that were really doing great, but now I wonder, man, if I had implemented this sooner, how much more could I have seen what they were doing and what they truly knew versus what I thought they knew. And finally, I do want to share, this is a module of the teaching membership this year, where I show you I show you how I conceptualize implementing a digital portfolio. I show how I take the standards and kind of break them down, different ways to organize. And it is a mini module of the teaching membership. And the teaching membership is designed to give you inspiration, tools, resources into how to teach in your choir classroom. And I've been kind of quiet about it, sometimes more quiet than others, about what it is entailing, because it's something that is still continuing to grow and continuing to evolve. But the teaching membership is something that I wanted when I was in the classroom full time. It is something that I longed for, and quite honestly, I kept waiting for other people to build it. Where was an opportunity for me to go online and watch how someone taught rhythm, how someone taught melody and harmony? What are some ideas to bring about student conversations of the world beyond music? What are unique things that I can learn relevant to the time and place I am in the school year without having to travel to professional development or spend a lot of money on professional development? You can join the teaching membership for a monthly fee. And if you sign up for a month and you go, I can't afford the next month, or I'm in it forever, you get to decide and you can cancel it at any time. I am so excited about what this is going to bring to our community. And for those of you that are already a part of the teaching membership, I just want to let you know how much you being a part of it means to me and inspires me. And I'm always open to suggestions, thoughts, ideas for what you want and what you need within that space. One last little plug is that we're growing in the summer, and I'm really excited to tell you about ways we are going to serve the teaching community, the singer community, the choir community beyond the teaching membership, and continue meeting this mission of getting more people singing through Choir Baton. Without further ado, here is my live presentation that I never dreamt would be released on the internet some 3 years later, but also still holds such a relevant message and hopefully inspire you to think about how you can creatively engage your students in learning opportunities that will engage them not only in the time that we're currently in, but also provide a form of reference and an anchoring to the fact that the work they're doing now matters and will continue to matter after we are all in quarantine.
I hate the thought of doing portfolios and adding another level of things that we have to do in addition to, I just want my kids to sing good. And I want us to have meaningful experiences in our performances and when we sing within the community and things like that. But we all know that with ASW, rest in peace, being gone, whatever next thing they have coming for us is they're going to need something tangible that speaks to the admin, the rest of the world's mind that is also applicable for us. So these are some things I use in my classroom, and I think you can pick and choose from them and utilize them, or you can put them together and utilize them within a portfolio setting as well. Yeah, the goal is that you can maybe look at and see, even though I'm also not a proponent of a portfolio system, and I'm going to pick on my dear friend Laura Sam. Earlier we were at the concert, and she's like, oh, you're presenting? And I said, yeah. She goes, what on? And I go, portfolios. And she goes, oh. and thanks for being here, but she was like, I'm not coming to that, but have fun. So that might be you too, but I'm with you in that boat, but I am convinced the more and more I work on this, and the more and more I think about it, I'm like, this is really valuable. It's really valuable. So these are my goals, that you can begin to envision the value of how a portfolio might not only be something you can access in your classroom, but can also help you be more successful, and then to give you some ideas to implement within your daily instruction that also boosts your students' literacy and as a way for you to provide and show growth of their learning. So we're going to talk, and I'm going to talk quickly about 8 different sections, and thanks, Laura. That is, the first thing is grading. So I've been teaching for about 10 years, and I'll never forget, it was about this time, my first year of teaching, and they were like, all right, grades are due. And this was before Power School, and where you just had your written grade book, and you would go to the computer and type in, A, B, or I think it was actually A and B's. It wasn't even a numerical system then. And I was like, okay, great. And I just went A. Now, I was teaching at a really, really, really good school, and they were all doing really well, but I had not been taught, and I didn't have super solid data with which to provide, other than the fact that they were singing well, and we were making music, and things were happening. And as I continued to grow as a teacher and go through different schools, I began to wonder, how can I show this data other than the fact of we're singing really, really well? And then as I began really thinking about how education is looking today. Raise your hand if you utilize like a performance etiquette or rehearsal work grade in your current grading system. Yeah, I do too. But my kids are gone all the time. They're gone for DECA. They're gone for a soccer game. They're gone because a parent has passed away. They're gone because they're taking care of siblings. They're gone because they are struggling with anxiety, and coming to school for them that day is too much. They're gone for so many different reasons. And so when I look at that rehearsal work grade and I'm like, they've been in rehearsal 2 out of the 5 days. Do I give full credit? Do I give partial credit? If it wasn't their choice to not be in rehearsal, how do I balance that? And then I sit at my desk and I have this moral dilemma, and an hour has passed and I've done nothing. So this also provides a way for me to, because we all know they can't make up that rehearsal work time, right? And going home and practicing your music is so different than being in the rehearsal. So what am I asking of them that helps them study their music at home, but that's also different from the rehearsal standpoint as well. They can't go home and rehearse music. They need something different to show within that. So for me, the purpose of doing this is also not, does the student know the material? It's not, can the student stand on stage and sing the music, but how can they show me ways that they're growing as a musician? And all of us Carol Krugerites know that we want to be teaching musicianship and not just the songs, right? That my band teacher and I talk about all the time. Now, he has not gone to see Carol Kruger yet, and I'm working on that, but he goes, we perform a concert, and then they pull out the music the next time, and they can't read any of it. And I'm like, Creighton, you just got to work on this literacy component. And so I think this works within that context of building that bridge of just not teaching the song, but teaching the music. So as I began to explore all of this portfolio stuff and really look at it, there's really 2 different types of portfolios, right? So the first one is process, and the second one is product. A lot of times when we go in for a job interview and they want to see a portfolio, is it process or product?
It's product.
It's product, right? Here is my best work. This is what I can do. And in essence, that's kind of what our concerts are, right? They're a product-based portfolio. But then there's also process-based portfolios, which, again, ASW, rest in peace. I'm going to think positively and think that's kind of along the lines of where that was going into. Here we are at point A, and here we are at point B, and here's how I've grown. It wasn't asking for the best that we had in the very beginning. It was asking for what was the process. So that's 2 types of portfolios to consider as we're talking about this. And then the second one is digital versus hard copy. And that's up for you and what works for you. I'm going to give a couple different resources of how I utilize both. And as much as I love to have paper in hand, we are a digital society. And the goal is to really get this stuff on a digital component to where kids can take with them forever. So UBD, is anyone having UBD conversations at your school? If you don't, fasten your seatbelts, it's probably coming. Understanding by design, which again is kind of like this beginning with the end in mind. And I think that the portfolio is a great approach to that concept. Understanding by design in the regular ed classroom is all about people having the test, and then you work backwards and form how you're going to teach from the test. And we've talked a lot about it at our school in our performing arts section of, our concert is like the test, and then we work back from the music. And I disagree, I think, because the process is to make them a stronger musician, and that's the end product. And so I think if people are utilizing those UBD, understanding by design, in your classroom, this really applies to that as well, and hopefully can give you some ideas that when your administrator, like ours did say at the beginning of the year, we need all these lesson plans, and it needs to be an understanding by design. You can say, great, we're going to do a portfolio, and here are the components of the portfolio, and then I'm going to teach the kids how to put the components within the portfolio as well. In my classroom, my goal is for the portfolio to be very process oriented. I don't want an end product. I want them to be able to say, this is where I was at the beginning, and this is where I am now, and this is where I've grown. And there's a lot of different reasons, and that could be a whole other session. But for me, that's what my goal is, so that the product is their process. And secondly, I utilize both a digital and a hard copy parts of it, and then I work to have them put the hard copy into a digital format, take a picture of it, make it a PDF, and then pop it in a folder. So that's kind of how it works for me, and I know different people do it different ways, and I'm so glad Phil is here, because Phil also does a portfolio, and we'll talk about how he utilizes it within his classes as well. So here are some applications of how I think you could potentially use these components within your portfolio. The first component I use is annotating. Again, Carol Kruger, can we read? Yes, and she's a big believer in writing. And can they write the music? And while I totally buy into that, I also want to see how are they writing within the music? What are their score markings? We know the importance of score study ourselves, but if I'm wanting kids to really understand music, I want them to be able to look at the score like I do as the director and make these decisions ultimately. So can my students not only follow along and read what's on the page, but how are they interacting with that score? Margaret Hillis, has anyone heard of Margaret Hillis? Okay, good. So Margaret Hillis is a really cool female conductor. She started the Chicago Symphony Chorus, and she studied with Julius Herford and Robert Shaw. She started Chorus America, and in 1977, when the Chicago Symphony conductor got super sick at a big performance at Carnegie Hall, she stepped in with a moment's notice and killed it. She killed it. And she's really well known for this. And she has this, and here's the printing thing from it where Margaret Hillis, she made everything fall into place, which that's, I think, kind of a dated reference. I don't know if we would have said that about a man during that point. But anyhow, that's, again, another session on women and men in music. But this is an article from that performance. And in the 1991 Choral Journal, in an interview with Dennis Schrock, who is the god of choral repertoire right now, or one of them, she talks about her analysis. And it says, after the bar line analysis, which is done with a black pencil and using a transparent ruler, I use a color coding system to mark dynamics and other principal material. I use red for anything that's strong, forte, fortissimo, triple forte, and I put a series of red arrows above the score for an accelerando. I use blue for the opposite, piano or mezzo piano. Usually I use a squiggly line for a ritardando, or a slower tempo will be a line through the score. I reserve green for pianissimo. Otherwise, I use brown, variety of colors, to indicate tempi. I use blue for anything up to 80. And she goes on to talk a little bit more about how she uses her colors. Now, last night there was a really great session on utilizing color in your score annotations as well, and I thought it was awesome. For me and my students, I don't use as many colors for a variety of reasons, but this is not an uncommon thing. I was talking to Julie earlier, and the teacher at Riverside does this as well. So there's a lot of different methods. This is just kind of what I use within mine. This is an example of Margaret Hillis's score, and this one is from Belshazzar's Feast, Walton's Belshazzar's Feast, within it, and you can kind of see how she's highlighted the choral staves and then done different things in the red, and she has her circles and triangles for meter and such. She said all music starts from score study. And I want to know, how am I teaching my kids to study the score, right? Because if they're not going to be in class because this, that, and the other is going on, and they can't rehearse at home as well as they need to, they can score study at home. And that's something, a way for them to interact with the music as well. And I'll give examples of that in a second. The next thing is song sheets. And I did something like this in college, and I hated them. And I talked about this at Wing It. And Nene, you were there, weren't you? And when I talked about this, you were like, oh yeah, we do them in our private study too. And again, it was like that growing, has anyone done them in private voice studies? Yeah. Cool. So I want to know, what are the primary, secondary, and tertiary elements I want my singer to be able to extract from the score? So the annotations are all about writing in the score and interacting with that way. And then what am I having them to pull out? And then how am I asking them to identify these? Charles Bruffy just was quoted in, I did work in Arizona, so I nerdily, it's not like I didn't read every state's ACDA like publication that they do on a monthly basis. But in this past month's Antiphon, which is the ACDA publication in Arizona, Charles Bruffy, who just retired from conducting the Phoenix Chorale, was interviewed, and he said, the most important thing for me is the word. I spend a lot of time on the text and try to realize the drama of the text. I try to figure out how the composer's harmonies and structures further the meaning of the words, and I usually think about how to pronounce sounds, how an adjective sounds, and how a conjunction sounds. I rarely extract the text, until I started doing this, really extract the text from the music. Well, that's how the composer started with the text, was within that context. So I'm missing this whole step of just writing out the text in a poem format and looking at it within that context. And that's something that my kids can do as well. It's another form of score study. They can go home, write it out, and read it from that aspect, and we can look at it outside of the music. And then the third component I do are video submissions. We have to be teaching our kids digital literacy, and I know that's terrifying for us because we're all on different levels of our comfortability with how we are engaging with the digital world. But how many colleges are now asking for digital video pre-screenings right before they go to audition and acquire? Send in a video. That's something that we can be teaching and is so standards-based. It's a way for me to check in with them individually and not waste class time. I can provide immediate feedback for them through these video submissions, and they also provide a really cool baseline for me to see student growth. And I'll show you examples of how I utilize these videos as well. It's one of the coolest things that I've done in my class, and I know a lot of us have been doing recordings, which is great and valid, but again, we are a visual art. We are a visual art, and I want to be watching how my kids are performing in their facial expression and how they're holding their body. How often do we talk about posture and breathing and where it's coming from, and then we're not checking in that and providing that context with which to give them feedback as well. So here are examples of how I utilize those three things: annotations, song sheets, and video submissions within my classroom. The first one are examples of annotations. So again, it is required for my kids to buy erasable, they exist, they're at Target, erasable colored pencils. Why erasable? Well, that's why we don't write in pen in our music. And they're super cheap, like $3 or $4. And I usually, at the beginning of the year, have sticky notes that I ask, bring me Kleenex, bring me Expo, bring me erasable colored pencils. And I then, we just color, if you will. These are how what I ask my students to identify. The first one being measure numbers. With and we all know this by now, like kids don't know how to write in measure numbers in their score. How many times do I look at a piece of music and it's like, if this is the measure, the number starts like in the middle or up here or over, so that's a grade. That's a grade, and that is something that we can do in a portfolio. You can do it as a pre-test or a post-test or however, or just a test to see where it is. Can your students accurately write in measure numbers? And it's so easy, and something, again, you can pop in a portfolio. Solfege. Now, and this is a Carol thing. I used to have, all my kids need to write in their solfege. And this past summer when I was at her thing, and she goes, why are kids writing in all the solfege? Because then they're just decoding the solfege. They're not reading the note heads anymore. And that was a big light bulb moment for me. So I don't have them write in the solfege for every song that we're doing. But if they do it, they write it in black or just the regular pencil color. Text translations and pronunciation. I use IPA, and so I have purple, and again, I have black. Now, yesterday they did a great job of talking about, again, all the different colors that you can utilize in score annotation, but for me, I want the biggest bang for my buck. I don't want it to be too colorful, so that's why I'm a little bit more minimalistic with the colors that I do choose. Tempo, key, and meter changes. They draw a green line straight through this through the entire system, which is great because then they're also practicing training their eyes to follow systems of music because they don't know how to read them or follow them. And it is a pop for those meter changes as well. I was really dumb and last semester programmed a piece that was way too hard for my kids, and it had a cajillion meter changes in it, and they did not sing it very well, but y'all, they knew those meter changes because we wrote them in on green, and they could, like, they knew the rhythm of it really, really, really well. It just had other crunchier aspects that weren't good, and I firmly believe it was because they were able to identify the measures and see when the meters were changing. And then the other big thing, I use dynamics, red and black, or red and blue. If it's crescendoing, it's red, mezzo forte, etc. And then dynamics blue, and then articulations are orange. And the other cool thing too that I've started doing as I'm introducing this is I have done symbols that are on colored paper. So if we're doing a warm-up, I can hold up the symbol that's like mezzo forte and utilizes those dynamics, and then it's also getting them to reinforce the color that they're using as well. And it's really cool, and it's very accommodating. Shane, this is, if you haven't met Shane yet, you need to meet Shane. We're trying to introduce him because he's a future music teacher. Well, you are a music teacher, but a future public music educator. And so Shane is student teaching with me in the spring, and we're also thinking about how we can devise this for students with visual impairments, because I have several students with visual impairments. So then I can utilize and say, well, was that the dynamic level that we're singing? If a student can't see the card or something like that. So there's a lot of workarounds within that. The colored pencils, it's my single most important thing that I do with the kids, and they latch onto it. And I'm working towards us getting to a point where they're not just highlighting and writing in, tracing, if you will, the crescendos and decrescendos, but thinking, well, there's not a crescendo here, but there could be. You know, we all know that tied note over a bar line or something like that, and taking it the next step forward, not just highlighting what's on the page. And then I have a checklist, and and I'll talk a little bit more within grading, but it also keeps them accountable. Is it not applicable if it's a song in English, and so there's no IPA in it, or if it's a song in English and there's no translations? Have they started it? Are they somewhere to a quarter completed? So on and so forth, and then I can provide feedback on that. And again, it's a level of accountability for them to utilize that checklist within that. And here I am just talking about the importance of writing in our measure numbers. This is an example of a student's workathon we did, Balilaka. And you can see here where it's kind of faint, but if you know the song, it has these long, lush chords that have to grow. And so this is an example of how we're writing in the crescendos and decrescendos and dynamic markings, even though they're not written in the score. This is an example from Debussy's Hiver vous mettez quand vilain, and it has a lot of articulations. It's crazy with articulations. So again, it's kind of faint, but you can see that the students have written it in. This is another thing of layering, right? Maybe their first thing is writing it in within their part, and then they go back and they do it in their other parts too. And so they provide growth, and they can say, oh, we're piano here, but they're blue and we're red. And it's a really great way to check within that. Here's something a little bit closer. You can see, this is like my dream student. Oh, and they said this last night, and I totally agree, like, this is amazing. I wish they all did this, right? But sometimes I'm just happy if they're pulling out their blue and reds and marking into it, because that's the biggest thing is are they writing in their scores? So there's all different levels of how much do you want them writing within that. The next thing, examples of song sheets. So this is the song sheet that I utilize. I first want them to be able to extract what's the title, what's the composer, what's the arranger, what dates are they written in. So many times we talk about this, and I even think there's a great rehearsal strategy, and I think can even use like pull out the Runstead or pull out the S involved or something like that. So we're like, yes, they are hearing the composer's name when we're asking them to pull out this next piece, but have they like written it down? Because not all of our kids are auditory kids and will pick up through it that way, but we know they're not writing these days. So there is something to be said for having them be able to extract that. I think, I came from the greatest high school choral program in the entire world, but I look back at all the music that we sang, and I didn't keep it because I had to turn it back in. But if I just had all the titles and song titles from this, heavens, I would love to know what I was singing in then. Now, not every student's going to keep all of that, but I'm a weird one. So have them writing out the text. What's the language? Are there particular notes of interest regarding the text or the text origin? And it's a great memorization tool. Right? I mean, that's how I studied for tests and things. So aside from the fact of having them write out the text to just engage with what the text looks like outside of the score, we'll help them memorize it and help them write and help them spell and think about grammar and all that fun stuff. And that's something an English teacher gets. That's something an administrator gets because it's within their wheelhouse. Then I start getting technical. Like, what part do I sing? In this song, I sing tenor 1. In this song, I sing alto. A lot of us, I know Andrea, where's Andrea? There. She has her girls change around a lot, right? You're not just a soprano 1. You're not just a soprano 2. Well, they can't remember sometimes, what their 4th period class is. Having them physically write down and say, I sing this and this part. My girls flip out about if I'm a soprano 1 or a soprano 2 or an alto. So let's extract the ranges within this piece and say, what's the difference between the alto line and the first soprano line? They might be the exact same ranges. Then why are you fussing about being a first soprano? Well, that's a lie. They never fuss about that. Why are you so fussing about being an alto? Something like that. So to be able to pull out the ranges and talk about it within that context. The location of the solfege syllables, that helps me also teach key signatures and unique rhythmic structures. That's a Carol thing, right, which she does when she pulls out all of her rhythms and says, why am I going to teach Toddy, Takadimi 2 if they haven't done it yet? So I should be doing that within my score study of pulling out all of the rhythms. Well, they can do that too, and then they can see the connection within that. This is, again, another example from the WC, talking about key signatures. What time signatures are you using? What meters are we doing? What's the variances of tempi? Or maybe there's none within that. What's the overall structure of the piece? We talk, this is the A section, this is the B section, but can we write about it? Can we not just have these conversations because that's so valid? I also have them identify articulations and dynamics used within the piece. So many times, I know I don't think about what are the range of dynamics within this piece that I'm utilizing. Is it all loud? Is that all what I want? Is it all soft? Is that what I want? Am I utilizing songs with a range of articulations and teaching that? So on and so forth. So having them engage with that. And they're just circling this as well. I mean, they're just circling, which is easy, and it's matching, It's like a word find. What's the historical context, the musical importance within this piece? And so these are all elements that are so applicable to our score. They're a part of our score study. They're what I should be doing in my score study at every piece before I'm looking at. And so if I know it's important for me, then that's a really cool way that then they can take this information and keep it as a part of their portfolio. The next thing is video assignment examples. This is another really cool thing. So I'll show you how I utilize these in a second, but this is one of my poor baby freshmen. And we'd been in school for 3 weeks at this point when she submitted this. And we'd been singing major scales, do-do-do. We sing them every day, and la-to-la from the very beginning, very onset of class. I maybe don't start the whole gamut of do-do-do the first day. I might just do a 5-note scale. But every day we're singing these scales. And then I have them submit video assignments of them singing it. I want to see, are you doing the hand signs? What's your face like? What's your posture like? And for the students' privacy, I won't show you that. But this was her first scale. be so excited. It's so good. I listened to that like 10 times and I was like, oh my gosh, we sing this every day. The class can do it, and that, like, just listen if you missed it. Oh.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do.
The last 5 are right.
And you can't see it, but her hand signs are there, and she's got some good posture, but oh heavens. So then, most recently, I wish that I could, like, put this, I don't want to tell her, you were so bad before, but then this is her newest submission in addition to other ones.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do.
Is that better? Yeah, right? Is it good? Right, like I'm not submitting that to All Carolina Choir and saying like, hey, let's do this. But holy mackerel, like that's so cool. So for me, when I ask for videos, particularly at the very beginning, the beginning of the year, I do not care what you sound like. I just want the video. I just want the video, because otherwise, if I didn't have that initial video of her, I would have been listening to her second video and being like, instead of celebrating how much she has improved in 4 weeks' time. And so that goes into a grading thing. So the videos, right? I could say we're singing... We just got through doing like this fun 2-part Mendelssohn piece with something over top of it. And yeah, I could say, well, I want you to sing this for me. But particularly with my babies, there's no way they're going to go home and be successful within that. So I want to hear them singing scales. And like you just heard there, and we begin teaching them. And as soon as I begin teaching them, after like a week or two, then I begin requiring them to submit them. So it's diatonic, then we do your major scales, then it's your minor scale, all 3 minor scales. And again, the first time they submit them, I don't care about accuracy. Because it's daunting. These kids hate videos. I was talking to Julie the other day, and she was like, my kids freak out about submitting them. They don't like to, because as willing as they are willing to do this, when it comes to submitting a video, they shut down. That anxiety that they have really, really comes out. And so I just turn it in. Just turn it in. Sometimes I'll go chasing them down, pulling them at lunch. Just turn in your video. And then some other options. And this is where, this is an unsponsored Carol Kruger session, I should just say. But her workshops provide such a cool opportunity for her to utilize all of those things that she's doing, like do, do, 1, do, re, 2, do, mi, 3rd. That's something that you can have them do on a video. And it's out of the context of the music, but it's building that ear. It's checking that ear. It's doing chord progressions, so on and so forth. Can they speak the text in the rhythm? We just did another song that utilized body percussion. Can you record yourself doing the body percussion? There's so much of what we do that is individual that this gives us an opportunity to submit. So this is something I know a lot of people have questions about within how I execute them. And I asked our Wake County tech guy recently if this was legal, and he said yes, so I've ran with it. Depending on your school, like Wake County school emails don't have a YouTube, so you can't connect a YouTube account to that. There's no YouTube. But majority of my kids, our school doesn't enforce us to use our countywide emails, and so majority of them are utilizing their Gmails anyways. So you can record a video on your phone, and so long as you have gone into a desktop computer and brought up, you just sign into your Google account and you click on YouTube. And it might say like, start a YouTube page. It's just literally like a button, you just have to click to start. Then you can upload your videos from your phone just like that onto YouTube. And I really encourage my kids to utilize the unlisted, right? Because then I have to have the link. No one else can see it. It remains private. If they do private, no one can see it. And a lot of times they don't want to leave it public. But if they do a private link, an unlisted link, then I can go in and see it. The other thing is I give plenty of time when assigning videos, because inevitably a kid is going to say, I lost my voice. I can't. You had a week to do it. You could have done it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You knew it was coming Friday. You had a week to do it. And that alleviates me from the whole thing of, like, if you'd been working it, well, I didn't know. Sorry, you had 4 days to be able to turn it in. It also helps me to help students that don't have computer access at home. My school is incredibly diverse, I have 3 students that have recently immigrated from Africa at my school. I have a couple, and within that, their language acquisition is in all different places. I have a couple students right now that are homeless. I have a couple students that also don't have internet at their home. And then I also have students that have everything that they could need. So I run the gamut, and when I am able to make myself available within that, they are successful. I even hand them my phone and say, here, go record it on my phone, and we can submit it through my account. And it works that way. I encourage them to practice utilizing Snapchat and Instagram. And they don't necessarily do it, but sometimes they do. And again, it's a chance for them to engage in videoing themselves before actually submitting it. I utilize there's a couple different ways to submit. So when I was teaching at my previous school, I had them, they all used their school email actively. It was very active. And so I made Google Drive folders for them and shared it with their email, and then said, when you complete your video, put your video link in, well, trust me, it's there. And if you want to see, it's just like literally a Google Doc that says the name of the video assignment, and then they put their link. But I got really tired really quickly of opening folders and stuff not being there. Real tired of it real quick. And so I was like, how can I make grading all of these easier for me? And so I utilize a Google form. And so I put it on our website, which I'm going to, and taking my phone off this because I don't know what embarrassing thing might pop up if I turn on to. So on our choir website, I have a for students section here. The password is the number of expectations they have for my classroom. What's the password? How many expectations do we have? And so they go into their thing and they just do a video submission link here. And their first and last name, what choir they're in, their class number, the name of the video assignment, and the assignment link. And they just pop all that in there, and it takes 2 seconds. If they've uploaded the video from their phone, it comes up and says, you have now completed your video. Would you like to share or tell a friend? And you can usually highlight the link there, and then just 2 clicks over and put it in there. And the thing I love about it is then I have one Google form, Google Doc, that tells me not only who submitted it, has the time they submitted it, and it makes grading so much easier because I just click to the next video and to the next video. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if a lot of schools are moving to Google Classroom and do an assignment in Google Classroom,
right.
When they submit all they have to do is click attachment, click video, and they don't have to go to YouTube. It just goes straight into.
I'm so glad you said that. Absolutely. And that's a super cool thing. Because our kids don't use Google Classroom like they could and should, and that's a battle I'm not fighting right now. For my culture, it works. And if y'all are Google Hangout, hello, that's awesome. Yeah. And then I can highlight all the videos quickly and say within that context, your student did do this, they didn't do this, etc. Or I make tiny URLs for them to be able to access. And then my favorite, the grading section. Grading is something I love to hate. I don't know, do you love grading? I love seeing the growth. I've watched these videos of my poor sweet child, like poorly singing a major scale and then betterly singing it the second time, numerous times. But I hate having to be like, that was a 93. That was a 94. That's my least favorite part about grading. But if I think of it in this context of seeing how they've grown, in regards to their annotations, the colored pencil aspect, the biggest thing for me is completeness, accuracy, and neatness. Completeness, accuracy, and neatness, because that's what I care about. I think making the effort to do it. That's a lot of coloring to do wrong or to not do. But if they're going through it and doing the time, and I make it about the music and not just about doing it to do it, it's to do it to make you a better musician, to help you see within the context of the score better. There's a reason behind it that correlates to the music that we're making. That's all that I care about. The second thing is they're grading song sheets. Maybe they don't know where to find the arranger, or what's the difference between the person that did the music versus the person that did the lyrics, that sort of thing. So pre-testing within that, or completion, and then going through an accuracy standpoint, and that's something that can be tiered for your ensembles. And then grading of the videos, completion, musicality, expression, hand signs, professionalism. For me, what I found to be most successful is to, particularly as you introduce this, is to just grade, did you do it? Did you do it? For me, that's the biggest struggle that I have with my students, is getting them to turn stuff in. And so that is really, and then I build on the accuracy. So for example, first 9 weeks, they all had to do the videos. That was their goal for the first 9 weeks, do your videos. For the second 9 weeks, I'm building still more things that they have to record, but then the ones from the first 9 weeks are now being looked at for accuracy. How accurate are you being in these now that you've had 9 weeks to study and go through them? And then in regards to portfolio grading, so I've begun looking at, have you done your annotations? Have you done your annotations, song sheets, and videos? Have you done them? And if yes, compile them, put them all together, because that's a skill, right? Like, not just doing it, but keeping up with it, keeping track of it. If you're doing PDFs of it, how are you storing it within your Google Drive, or maybe you're doing them hard copies as well? But that can be a midterm. Just compiling it and turning it in and doing it. Or a final, but something you might have already thought of that I hadn't thought of until recently. Miss Philman, does that mean if we're seniors and we're exempt from exams, we don't have to do the song sheets and the annotations and things like that? And I know so just be prepared for that question. If you do decide to go somewhat of any of that route, that it's coming. And then the compilation of it all, and I think that's what works for you. I'm still figuring so much of this out and figuring out what I want it to look like and how it's going to be best. But is this better? Okay. I think, again, making it digital is huge. And for the paper components, even the music components, aside from that little thing called copyright law, CPDL versions or something, you can definitely have them take legal pictures of. But my friend, and then here's an example of how I've had them put it in a Google Doc, but my friend, Mr. Mullinax here, I don't know why it says, sorry, Phil. Phil Mullinax at Wakefield High School has his kids do something really cool. He has his kids make websites, and he is a big sight reading factory person, right, Phil? And he has all of his, you tell them.
Well, they have several different tabs that they do over the course of the semester in their portfolio. One of them is their music literacy tab, and then they are required to submit examples of their sight singing. You can do a screen print of it, and then you also can download the audio file. And so they have to put their screen print there and the audio file either underneath it or beside it of something like the first 3 that they did, or 3 examples in the first 9 weeks. And then you had to do 3 more examples in the next 9 weeks. And then over the course of time, that getting them to do it right at the beginning is awful, But what I do with the electronic portfolio is I make that a project between the end of our last concert and the end of the semester. I fit juries in there and other things too, but we take a whole week and just work on our electronic portfolios in class. We take laptops in the room, but anyway, you can have them do that. And that way they can see the growth over a long period of time. And I can go back and see how they're going, how the class as a whole is growing.
All right, so here, this is one it's just really cool. And you can go to his website, and he has 3 different kids' examples of how they're utilizing Weebly and the sight reading factory and things like that.
And basically, I have those on the website for the kids, so they can go to it. And I said, yours does not have to look this pretty. It does not have to be professional looking. I say these are because these students work on them over the course of 8 semesters. you're just using the information there to form it pretty late.
That's just awesome. And what a real world skill, regardless of if they're going to go out and be the next, published composer like Shane, or if they're going to be working in IT, or they're going to be so much, it's so cool. I just love it. So I just think he just showed you such a great example of how he's tracking his students' growth. And if you pull up the sight reading things, you can see the beginning sight reading things that they were doing versus the later ones. You heard an example of my one student and the growth that she's just made in this 9 weeks, going beyond the fact of them being able to recognize what dynamic markings are in there to being able to utilize them within the score and so on and so forth. I just think there's so many real world applications to this. And when I think of a portfolio in those contexts, it's a lot less daunting for me. So yeah, John.
Phil.
Can
I say that it is a very powerful tool when you get into meetings with administration and you're doing final reviews and you're getting your license and all that kind of stuff. And you look back, you say, well, this is what these students are doing, this is how they're doing literacy, or this is how, we're working on this particular skill, or addressing. I've actually changed my portfolio requirements for this year, and my portfolio specifically aligned to specific assignments that correlate more to the essential standards. And how I'm addressing the essential standards that I don't have time to actually do in class during rehearsal, but I can address those at times. And when I do those here, so it's really effective.
Yeah, Bethany.
Piggyback off what you were going to say. I do something similar, not to this extent, but it really helped me in the sense that I had a mom who just couldn't understand why her son wasn't going to be able to go to the advanced choir when he's a great singer. But so I just pulled up his portfolio in a sense, and his sight reading factory exercise in which he said, "Oh, F this, what the H at the end," and I just played it, and then our meeting was over because it was right there, and then she totally understood. Actually, she didn't, but he was not going to the advanced choir. So
That's the other thing too is. It's like holding them accountable. I didn't have to turn in a lot of. We have got to be giving them assignments outside of class to show that, to give us that feedback, that data. And I really sucked at that. And I still struggle with it too because I'm so focused on the rehearsal and what's happening in there and what's the music making. But it provides that data, and it's that accountability that what we are doing in the class is real.
Hi, Choir Baton listeners. My name is Beth Philemon, and I am your host for the Choir Baton podcast and your founder of Choir Baton itself. I just wanted to take the time to share with you a little bit about why and how. Why Choir Baton? Well, 6 years ago, I was a choir teacher with experience, education, at a new school, realized I did not know where to start teaching singers that had very varied backgrounds and experiences with music education, and in particular, choral music. I realized so much of what I don't know. And since that time, I have been on a quest to find answers and ask more questions. And one of the answers I kept looking for was an online community where I could find resources that would help me in a middle and high school choral setting teach a wide array of experienced singers how to quickly and efficiently show up in a choral rehearsal. I kept looking, and I could never find it. And so eventually I decided this is something that I had to create. I had to create it because if I knew I needed it, surely there was one other person in this world that needed it too, and I could at least, if not just help them by sharing what I was learning, I could at least just connect with them and let them know that they weren't alone, and they would hopefully remind me that I wasn't alone. Well, 2 years into starting this thing called Choir Baton as an Instagram takeover account, first just to connect with others, we now have the podcast, we have sold t-shirts, we have just launched this membership opportunity that I needed all of those years ago. The Choir Baton Teaching Membership is a monthly subscription that you can join or cancel at any time, depending on your needs, wants, desires, etc. The Choir Baton membership is designed for anyone that is looking for ways in how to teach music literacy to any type of student, but especially middle and high school students that are needing to build a musicianship of not just because this is a quarter note, this is a quarter note, but why this is a quarter note. What is the function of this note? What are the constructs of this? Not just how can I recognize it on a page of music, but how can I draw it? How can I improvise? How can I sing alone and with others and really develop as a total musician? This is what the teaching membership is all about. In addition to teaching these music literacy skills, providing videos of instruction and sequencing, I also provide notes sheets for you as the teacher, but also to give to your students. I know more than anyone how so many times teachers are not allowed to simply have students take down the notes from what they are sharing in class, but you have students that need for you to provide notes to them. Well, we are giving you note sheets that correspond directly to the sequencing. And in addition to the note sheets, there's assessments that correspond with that as well. How you choose to implement those assessments is totally up to you, but it's important for you to be able to see, are students understanding what we think they are in music, or have we just not sung it for them enough times that they have now essentially learned it by rote? Now, we are continuing to grow in the number of assessments that we are offering and in the number of note sheets, but trust me, there's over 50 pages already within the teaching membership at this time for you to take advantage of. And I know that right now, for a lot of us, we are not teaching in our classrooms like we expected to finish out this school year. And this is the beauty of the teaching membership. Each month, there is an online mini course that is a part of the membership itself. This mini course is specifically designed to help teachers work through whatever is relevant to the teacher community within the world we're living in at this time period. So for the month of April, we are talking about how you can take some of the things that you're asking students to do in their digital learning experience and utilize them in a digital portfolio that is creating this product for them to take into years to come, since quite frankly, we don't have the opportunity to give end of the year concerts. Now, the teaching membership is but a small part of the reach Choir Baton is only excited to start. The other component of Choir Baton launching this July is an opportunity for singers, primarily adult singers, that are having a desire to sing in choirs, but they either never sang in choir and never learned how to read music, or they did and it's been years and they don't remember, or they currently sing in a choir but still have so many more questions oftentimes than answers about what is actually happening in that piece on the piece of paper. This is an online course directly for them, because if we want more people singing, it doesn't just happen at the school level, it has to happen at our adult level as well. Now, it might surprise you to learn that as a person who has taught in the classroom for 10 years, I went left teaching to get my MBA in the fall of 2019 as a full-time student at North Carolina State University. One of the things that continues to shock me to this day, but also not shock me, is the number of conversations that I have with people in just the business school that I am in about those that have currently sung in a choir or have always wanted to sing in a choir. And the number one problem I always find is that they don't know how to read music. They would want to sing in a choir, but they don't know how to read music. And while everyone can sing, this is something I firmly believe, to really exist in a choir and to grow, reading music is an important component. But how do you teach an adult how to read music when they're not entering your classroom every single day? This is the heart and the mission of the Choir of Baton Singer course. When you, as a choir teacher, run into a former student that wants to sing in a choir, it's been years since they sang in your choir, but they're nervous about their sight reading abilities, this is the course you recommend to them. When you are in your church choir recruiting for every Sunday or maybe just those special occasion performances, and you hear someone that has an amazing voice, but they are apprehensive about joining choir because they don't know how to read music, this is the course. When you hear someone singing in the aisle of the supermarket and think, you need to be in the community chorus that I conduct or that I sing in, and their response is, I've always wanted to do choir, but I don't know how to read music. This is their course. If we want people to continue to sing in choir, yes, we need them singing, but we also need to have a place where they can learn how to read music. Now, singing in a choir is easy, but it's also insanely hard and complicated, and we do a lot. And it's quite frankly no longer healthy for us to just ask people to show up and learn through osmosis anymore. We don't work in that type of environment. Instead, people want to learn. And the Choir Baton singing course is this opportunity for anyone to learn how to read music, to understand kind of the ins and outs and the culture of choir so they can show up, they can feel a part, and they can feel prepared to not only lend their voice to the ensemble, but lend their heart because they are no longer lost or confused about what is happening on the page and around them. For more information on the Choir Baton Singer course, head to choirbaton.com or the link in this bio and click on the link for more information. The course is scheduled to be launched in July, and I am so excited for more people singing.